CAPL interview question and answer. If you're not subscribed this channel, please do subscribe. In this video, you are going to learn about what are all the questions that you may get in CAPL so that you can just figure it out the related questions as well to perform better in your interview. Alright, so we'll start with the first question. Whenever you mentioned you have the skill set of CAPL in your profile, the first question comes is what exactly is CAPL? So of course the abbreviation is Communication Access Programming Language. More about is CAPL is a procedural language similar to C, which was developed by Vector. The execution of program blocks is controlled by the events. The programs, that is CAPL programs, are developed and compiled in a dedicated browser, say CAPL browser. This makes it possible to access all the objects maintained in the database, that is messages, signals, environment variables as well as system variables. So these are all the statements that you can give for the question what is CAPL. In addition to that, CAPL provides many predefined functions that support working with CANoe and CANalyzer, development, testing and simulation tools. The second question is why CAPL? Alright, so it's a very simple answer. It is a dedicated to observe the behavior of communication protocols like CAN, LIN, MOST, Ethernet, etc. So to observe or to analyze the communication behavior, you are going for the CAPL. What is the difference between CAPL and C? Of course, in the first slide we have mentioned the CAPL is a similar to C, but there is a difference, right? So what exactly the difference is? C is a object or structured oriented programming language, whereas CAPL is a event oriented programming language. Is CAPL is a platform dependent? Yes, definitely. A CAPL is developed by Vector. We can use CAPL only in the Vector environment, that is the CAPL browser. Rather, like other programming stuffs, like if you want to learn Python or Perl or C, you can just have the online compiler there, you can practice. But CAPL is not giving that opportunity. If you want to use, you have to go for the dedicated platform, that is Vector, CANoe or CANalyzer. Structure of CAPL. CAPL program consists of two main parts: declaration of global variables, declaration of user defined functions and event procedures. Even you can add up other parts also, like you can have an evaluation of the messages, evaluation of the signals you can add. But these are all the syntax wise, this is the two parts, that is global variables, user defined functions and event procedures. What do you mean by messages in CAPL? Yes, so if you consider the messages in the database, inside messages you will have signals. But if you consider the CAPL programming, the message is a keyword. Alright, so message is to the output by the CAPL or declared with the keyword, that is message. The complete declaration includes the message identifier is. You can have the message with identifier and with the value as well. Say for example, the message engine data can be defined in the database in the form of like message 1, message 2 and message, that is engine rpm e3. So this engine rpm is a engine data that you can declare over here, and you can just process or perform the in the later parts of the CAPL. What exactly the event procedure is? When you ask this question what exactly the event procedure is, you have to give the two ways of explanation, that you have to go for the scratch. So what exactly procedure is, what is event is? Procedure is something that you have to follow. All right, so if your boss ordered you to follow that, yes, of course you have to follow, that is procedure. You have to follow the procedure. But the event is whenever the particular event occurs, then only you have to follow. So for say for example, you have to switch on your UPS if the current goes off. So whenever the power goes off, you have to go for the battery. So that is what the event procedure is. Procedure is something which followed as an instruction. Event procedure is a steps instruction for some events triggered by the protocols. And what is event actions? Of course, event action is dependent on the event procedures. Action is something which followed the procedure, that is whatever the procedure has been given declared in the previous one, the event action has to follow. Event action is a steps or instruction for some actions that are triggered by the events. All right, so now we'll get into variables. There is two types of variables in CAPL: system variables and environment variables. So what exactly the environment variables is? Okay, so environment variables describes external input and output signal of a node, and they are used for communication of signals between nodes in a real network. So for example, if say for example, if you are a topper of your classroom, all right, so in your classroom, if somebody calls you topper, then yes, everyone can recognize it's you. But if you go out of the school, if someone has call you topper, no one will recognize, because your scope, say you are a variable, your scope will be within your classroom. So within your environment, you can say. So that is what environment variable is. What are the variables declared as environment variable? It will be applicable only with respect to the particular environment. If it comes out, then there will be the no scope for the particular variable. So environment variables are assigned to the ECU. So mainly in ECU variables is considered as the environment variables, because the variables will be applicable only inside the ECU environment. But in testing, you can tell it is in the CANoe environment. Of course, this is a contrast to the system variables. So system variables, you can it will be accessible for the external people also. If there is any external source comes, it can access the system variable. So again, we have mentioned the ECU. So these are all the inputs, that is environment variable inputs. It will process, it will gives the output as an injector. So again, this is again same. So we have these kind of switch 1, switch 2, these are all the, we can be mentioned the environment variables, and it will goes as the output. All right, so now we'll get into the system variables. What exactly the system variables is? System variables can be used for updating the internal parameters. So as I said, if there is any external source comes and access, it can access. Of course, it's not only for accessing, it can also modify the data, that is modify the calibration parameters. That is what system variables is. So system variables are used for the development and testing, as they provide reliability to modify and analyze the internal variables. Alright, so system variables brings about the system it's being used for. So this is the exact statement you have to give, and you have to give for the system variables and environment variables. And next question is, what is the difference between system and environment variables? It's a very simple. System variables can be accessible, that is whenever the variable the particular node wants to communicate, the system variables are used to transmit and receive the data between the external application and the nodes, whereas environment variables describes the behavior of the nodes with regards the external inputs, outputs, or they can control its behavior. They are only available for the CANoe. What is on timer? On timer is a function which is used to specify the event or action to be executed with specific time defined once CAN communication is on. So whenever the CAN communication is on, what are all the variables you have declared inside the on timer variable, timer block or timer function, those will be executed with respect to the specific time. So this is a simple syntax for the on timer functions. See, here we have mentioned set timer variable 1, set timer cyclic variable 2, set timer cyclic variable 3. Here we have mentioned 1000 milliseconds. So all these declared here is a milliseconds. That is 1000 milliseconds is nothing but 1 second. So 1000 millisecond, 2000 millisecond, that is 2 seconds. So here we have again set timer and set timer cyclic. So if your interviewer asks you to send particular signal for one time, or send for the multiple times with the periodicity of 2000 milliseconds, then you can use set timer for only once, and set timer cyclic is for keep on repeated. If you want the variable has to transmit in a repeated way, then you go for the set timer cyclic. What are all the data types in CAPL? So in CAPL we have three classification of data types. One is integer, another one is individual characters, then another is floating point numbers. And integer, you have so many stuffs like byte, word, d word, int, long, in64, keyword. Then individual character, it's character. Then floating point is float, double, and it's all 8 bytes. So in integer you can have unsigned as well as signed. In unsigned you have 1 2 4, and in signed you have 2 4 8. Again in answer you have 8 bytes. So these are all just a classification, but you can tell all these if someone asks you about the data types in CAPL. How can you log in when CAPL executions? So in CAPL you can log, right? So you can record the data whatever you have done. So you can, by enabling the logging block, you'll have the block logging block. By enabling the logging block, select any of the formats like easily readability format. So for whatever is understand for you, you can always go for ASCII format also. It's simple like notepad. You can open it and you can analyze your log. What are the modes of execution in CANoe? There are two modes. There are online mode and offline mode. So online mode is something that you are executing to generate the log, and offline mode is something what you have log in your hand, you want to analyze. So as you aware, there is getting the lab slot or tool slot is bit difficulty. So whenever you got the availability of lab, you can use online mode, and for analysis you can go for the offline mode. So once you get the log, you can analyze in your local PC also by using offline mode. How can you read the function signal using CAPL? So you can directly access the signal values for the purpose that is write dollar. So this is just you are reading the signal. All right, so reading the signal, for that you have to mention dollar in front of the signal name that is in the LHS. Int value, here the value is a signal name, it's in the LHS side, and you have to read that is a dollar sign engine RPM. You want to read the engine RPM. So the value is a variable, it will holds the engine RPM. It may be 2500 RPM, so it may hold this value and it will print you. So this is, you can read like this. And if you want to set some value, you want to give some value, if it is a other programming language, you can use the term call, you can give. But in as it is a CAPL, so event procedure language, you have to mention the term called set value. How to set value to the signal? In CAPL, you can directly set signal values. For this purpose, you have to use again the dollar sign in front of, but it is in the RHS. See, engine coolant temperature, that is here you have mentioned dollar sign, and in our RHS right hand side, you can write the particular value, and you can also compare if the engine coolant temperature is more than 150, or write stop engine. So as it is a 140, it will not be stop, it will maybe keep on running, but you have to set the particular value for the variable. So this can be attained by using the dollar sign. So dollar sign is used for both reading the value as well as setting the value. All right, what is online mode? The process of executing the script and save the log in any applicable format is called online mode. For that, you can just click on this and it will be enabled to the online mode. All right, so you just want to give execution. What is offline mode? For the purpose of analyzing the log file and run the measurement to analyze executed log in the offline mode. You can just select this to offline mode, you can execute, you can observe their graphical window or trace window as well. How can you reuse code in CAPL? Of course, reusing code is familiar with almost all the programming language. In CAPL, how can you do that? You can reuse CAPL code more easily in multiple simulation setups. The macros are developed, replaced with the text that CAPL compiler prior to the subsequent processing in the program. So you'll have so many macros available to reuse. So if somebody asks you how can you reuse the code, you can go for macros. That's the best option in CAPL. So in macros, it's a simple syntax, it's a node name. In channel, you can see number of channels to which the node is assigned, then network name, number of network to which the channel is assigned, and a file name, which file contains the source code is, then base file name, name of the .can file that is just compiled and especially useful in the include files, bus types, that is bus type of the channel to which the node is assigned. So these are all the macros, that is commonly used macros, you can tell. All right, so using these macros, you can make the program so simpler. How can you create the executable program file, that is CPF? You can see CBF format, so CAPL binary format. In order to create the executable program, it's like a executable jar file, it's like a in a batch file. So you can tell just for the easy readability, in order to create an executable program file in the that is in CBF format, CAPL binary format, extension is .cbf. You must compile the program with CAPL compiler. In CAPL compiler, you have to compile so that the particular stuff will convert into CBF format. What exactly CANDB? So CANDB is nothing but the database which holds messages, signals, nodes, and whatever you want, you can go for it. And you have to write your CAPL script only within the scope of the database or with some system or environment variables. So CAPL supports the work with the symbolic database. This database contains identifier, messages, signals, as I said. So these are all the statements. Then the database can be created using created or edited or viewed using the database editor, that is CANDB++. Assigning database to the CANoe configuration is also one of the main stuff in the CANDB. They can use the associated symbolic parameters instead of identifier and data types. Also, we can use the symbolic parameters also for using CANDB. Mention some warning. So this is one of the common question you may get so far. Mention some of the warning you faced when you are executing the CAPL. Here we have mentioned 2 to 3 warnings, so it will be helpful for you, and you can also list out what are the warnings you have met. You can note it down, and it will be helpful for you to crack the interviews. So first warning is specified channel not available. This may occur when you are mentioning wrong channel ID for the variable declaration. The code has no effect. This may occur if you use not applicable operator. And empty control statement found. This may found if you use extra semicolon. Also yes, that's what, if you use this 2 semicolons in a row, you can get the empty control statement found. So this is the one of some warnings that you want to use, and you can also note down what are the warnings you faced so far. Mention some errors you faced when writing CAPL scripts. Pass error. So this is a very common error. This may occur when you are mentioning wrong channel ID for the variable declaration. With this error, you cannot proceed further. Declaration invalid. This may occur if you use not applicable operator. So this ends this CAPL tutorial. I guess you got something like how to answer the question and what would be the answer, how would be the answer, and how would be the question, so that you can easily draft. With these questions, you can able to draft the relevant questions as well, and you can get ready for your interview perspective. All right, so if you're not subscribed this channel, you can do subscribe, and catch you in the next video. Until then, bye, take care.